Hi folks, Tom McCoy with yet another episode of Arbor Shield. Today on the show we have a real treat, and I really appreciate these guys being here. We have Jonathon Currigan to my right and Tim Nellet to my left. Both these gentlemen have served overseas in deployment combat situations, and were gracious enough to come in the studio today and just talk a little bit about what I call, fact versus fiction. What we've been led to believe by the media, perhaps. What is the true thing about coming back and assimilating back into civilian life, and some of the struggles that come with that. So, Jonathon, we'll start with you. Can you give us a little brief resume on what you did overseas, length of tour, that kind of thing?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. My name is Jonathon Currigan. I am a U.S. Army veteran. I served 16 years. I got out in December of 2011. I was stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina for 14 years. Of that 16 years, I spent time in Afghanistan for multiple deployments, and I was in Iraq.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jonathon. Thanks for being here today. Tim?
Oh yeah, thanks for having me, Tom. My name's Tim Nellet. I served in the U.S. Marine Corps 2005-2009. I was stationed in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. Did about 9 months in Iraq, 7 months in Afghanistan. I was a U.S. Marine Corps infantryman, so did combat operations on both deployments. Went to Ramadi, Iraq, just kind of in the Al-Anbar province near Baghdad and Fallujah. And then the little small town of Garmsur, Afghanistan, which is kind of in the southern Helmand Valley near the Pakistan border.
Okay. I really appreciate both of you being here today. And so before we jump into this first clip, I do want to ask you guys this, because I'm going to forget. The audience knows I forget a lot. Do you appreciate when people say thank you for your service, or is there a better way to say that? And is there a better, does that resonate with you guys when somebody says thank you for your service, or is it something you'd rather hear?
For me, Tom, it's a mixed bag. I guess it depends on my mood, and it depends on possibly who it's coming from.
Okay.
I don't want to say I'm not, empathetic or sympathetic, but sometimes it just, you get a sense of, if it's genuine or not.
Got it.
So.
And I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, okay. I'm always quick to say thanks, but I'm more quick if it feels genuine, then I'm more apt to be accepting of it.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, let's watch the first clip here. This will be a law enforcement clip out of Chicago as officers respond to a shooting.
Left 40, go ahead, boss. South of Madison or north of Madison? You say north of Madison. North of Madison.
It's not Washington.
North of Madison. Go south. After he shot, he ran east of the alley over here. North of Madison, east of the viaduct.
North of Madison, so it's that.
All right, north of the Madison. Keep sensing clear. Keep 10 and clear. Keep 10 and clear. He's north of Madison, east of the viaduct. 1140, we got the bus barn on the corner, so we got to go. There's really nowhere up for him to go. You got to be,
Park right here on the sidewalk.
He's running. All right, he's running now.
Hey, he went to the front of the building, bro.
All right, somebody got eyes on this guy. 1 block north of Madison. Shots fired again. Shots fired. Use caution. 6-3 multiple shots fired. Multiple. All right, 11-6-3 is called multiple. Watch the crossfire, everybody. Watch the crossfire.
hear all these shots from an automatic rifle go off, and you hear somebody scream, is an officer hit? Is an officer hit? And of course you have all this mayhem breaking loose. You know, you have the sirens, which to this day give me a lot of goosebumps. I react to that because when you're a cop and you've called for assistance and you hear those sirens, man, it's pretty incredible because you know the cavalry is coming, you know, to help you. But you have a lot of, you heard a lot of confusion, you know, the two officers talking in the car as to where the suspect's going. You have a lot of things breaking loose. You have a lot of people on the radio that probably shouldn't be on the radio. And you hear that, the command officer say, you know, clear this channel so we can find out what's going on. It gives you an idea. So what are some of your thoughts? And the reason I use that is because, like I said to these guys, you know, when I watch some of the clips overseas, a lot of this was very similar. You know, the chaos that's going on, the screaming, the yelling, the shots, and people trying to discern what's breaking loose. So, what are your thoughts? It doesn't matter which one must go with Jonathan on this clip specifically, as it relates maybe to your own experiences overseas and so forth.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. One of the first things I thought of was immediately how prepared you are for a mission. As soon as something becomes very intense, whether it be, in my case, if you're mission planning to go do a raid, and bullets start flying, how very chaotic it becomes. The radio traffic becomes very, very sporadic, and it becomes very cluttered in trying to figure out what's going on. Also, if you're in a traveling formation and like either an IED gets off and you're in a small ambush, you're trying to direct fires and get everybody on the same page. Well, how critical it is, in that moment to stay calm when everything around you seems to be going completely bonkers. Right. And just watching that video, I was replaying certain things in my head from my experience. It was like, oh yeah, I know how that feels. Yeah, definitely. Okay.
It's interesting as you're talking. I'm seeing Tim, nodding. So obviously you're in agreement. What are some of your thoughts as you watch it, as it applies to your own experiences?
Yeah, it's just it's always chaotic. It's something that you train for a lot in the military for certain situations like that, particularly depending on your job. But in the moment you get into kind of a firefight situation or something like that, it becomes readily apparent how much the training matters, because you rely so much on muscle memory and just kind of reflex and instincts kicking in, and how much communication matters, because things get so chaotic so fast, and everybody trying to stay on the same page, particularly if you have different elements involved, different units, or maybe your platoon spread out, or whatever the case may be. Communication is so key, and something that I could see definitely from that clip was that happening a lot with the police officers as well, and kind of keeping everyone on the same page can be really, really trouble.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the the bar was higher for you guys overseas because obviously it's different in a combat situation from day to day than it is working in law enforcement. But there is that moment in time where you have everything breaking loose, and like you said, you got to go into training. So let's comment real on the training thing. Okay, so I'm a big World War II history buff, I guess, and I don't know why, but I am. And as I listen to these guys, whether they flew aircraft, whether they were infantry, didn't matter what they were, but these guys always comment that the reason they took out the machine gun nest all by themselves or whatever, it was training. The training took over. I didn't even think, that's the thing I hear a lot. I didn't really think about what I was doing. It was just all, memory, whether it was muscle memory or the training or what have you. And as you were talking about the importance of training, I was thinking of the film that to me exemplifies leadership, We Were Soldiers, you know, with Mel Gibson portraying. But in there, they train and they retrain and they train. I'm thinking to myself as I'm watching, I'm thinking, my goodness, man, I mean, how many times can you hump a pack, or how many times can you do this? But I have to believe that, you know, in the first battle of the Vietnam War, that came into play, especially when you see the odds, you know, that they were outnumbered by the North Vietnamese at the time. So, so maybe each one you could speak to the training, and when I say that, remembering our audience probably, you know, may never have been in the military and law enforcement. The importance of training, maybe, as it relates to the military, and what were your experiences serving in the military with regard to that same training? And I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to draw any inferences, but I'm just putting it out there. The importance of training, you know, where's that come into play?
Well, I'll hit on two aspects of it, because I mean it goes back to even when I was a younger kid, growing up, being an all-state athlete. You know, you're going to practices, repeating the same plays over and over and over, and becoming a better football player and a leader on the football field, among other sports, and then going into the military and then being used to that repetitive amount of training, and then doing it over and over, and at times even then thinking, oh God, this really just is not cool. It's horrible, it's hot out, or it's cold out, you know, why are we continuing to do the same thing? It's like, I've learned this already.
Right, that would be my attitude. Yeah.
But in the instance of a combat situation, I can go back as early as July, you know, 2002, you know, one of my first firefights, and you know, as soon as the bullets started flying and the bad guys started coming after us, it was second nature just to react in that manner, which I knew I had done over and over and over.
Gotcha.
And afterwards was when everything came to clear. It was like, whoa, that just happened.
Right. Okay.
But I didn't think about it in the moment because it was just instinctive.
Okay. Tim? A lot of nodding again, man. You get a lot of nodding from your partner here, so that's good, man. So again, with regard to the training thing, what do you think? Where are your...
Yeah, absolutely. You don't always know necessarily where you're going to be going, or what your operation's going to look like before deployment. Sometimes not up until only maybe a couple months before. But nevertheless, there's usually some sort of workup that's involved for any kind of overseas deployment. There's the general like check in the box sort of things, like get your unit up to speed. But kind of really to get ready for any situation, you go to various different training operations. You go out in the field, so you spend a lot of time out practicing different maneuvers, or getting down more time on the rifle range, practicing marksmanship, stuff like that. And then sometimes just going out with your unit and practicing specific scenarios that might occur. So say for like example, your radio guy gets taken out, so how to respond to that, or other members of leadership getting taken out, so kind of responding in a lot of different what-if scenarios, because you know they sometimes might happen. The more you practice it ahead of time, and the more training you get in, just the more effective you are when it does happen.
Okay. I'm going to try to remember that as I go through my last, what we call ART, annual refresher training. And I will admit that many of us are like, ugh, it's that time of year again, but I'm sure these guys are right, that it all comes in. Okay, we're going to go to a couple clips here from Sebastian Younger. Is that, I pronounce that right? And he is a civilian, but spent a considerable amount of time overseas with the guys in Afghanistan, I believe. And there was even a movie or a book written about that. So we'll cut to these clips a minute.
I was particularly close to a guy named Brendan O'Byrne. I'm still very good friends with him. He came back to the States. He got out of the Army. I had a dinner party one night. I invited him. And he started talking with a woman, one of my friends, and she knew how bad it had been out there. And she said, Brendan, is there anything at all that you miss about being out in Afghanistan about the war. And he thought about it for quite a long time. He finally said, "Ma'am, I miss almost all of it." And he's one of the most traumatized people I've seen from that war. "Ma'am, I miss almost all of it." What is he talking about? He's not a psychopath. He doesn't miss killing people. He's not crazy. He doesn't miss getting shot at, seeing his friends get killed. What is it that he misses? We have to answer that. If we're going to stop war, we have to answer that question. I think what he missed is brotherhood. He missed, in some ways, the opposite of killing. What he missed was connection to the other men he was with. Now, brotherhood's different from friendship. Friendship happens in society, obviously. The more you like someone, the more you'd be willing to do for them. Brotherhood has nothing to do with how you feel about the other person. It's a mutual agreement in a group that you will put the welfare of the group, you will put the safety of everyone in the group above your own. In effect, you're saying, I love these other people more than I love myself. Brendan was a team leader in command of 3 men. And the worst day in Afghanistan, he was almost killed so many times. Didn't bother him. The worst thing that happened to him in Afghanistan was one of his men was hit in the head with a bullet in the helmet, knocked him over. They thought he was dead. He was in the middle of a huge firefight. No one could deal with it. And a minute later, Kyle Steiner sat back up from the dead, as it were, because he'd come back to consciousness. The bullet had just knocked him out and glanced off the helmet. He remembers people saying, as he was sort of half conscious, he remembers people saying, "Steiner's been hit in the head. Steiner's dead." And he was thinking, "I'm not dead." And he sat up. And Brendan realized after that he could not protect his men. And that was the only time he cried in Afghanistan, was realizing that. That's brotherhood.
Most of the shows I do, there's always a portion that I really look forward to within the show itself as with regard to the topic. And this is one of mine. Anybody that knows me, my wife certainly would be like, yeah, I could see that. But the whole aspect of the importance of brotherhood, I think a lot of police officers go into this line of work, one of the reasons being the family, the brotherhood that only being in the blankety blank can do. I mean, you can't find that anyplace else. It's when your life is on the line and this person intercedes for you, or vice versa, or collectively you address the threat. But you can't duplicate that anyplace else in the civilian world. And so I run this because, number one, I'm very impressed with Sebastian. As I said to you guys, I spend a lot of time poring over different clips, and usually my command officer will come up and say, "Is this the best use of your time?" And then I have to explain the whole spiel about what I'm doing and everything. But anyhow, he comes across, Sebastian comes across as a very credible eyewitness, if you will, to the stuff he's seen. So what I was hoping that each of you would be willing to do is address what he just said with regard to coming back to the civilian world after you've been in combat situations with your peers, and that moment in time when you realize that the brotherhood here you probably won't be able to replicate again, and you're certainly missing it, I would think. So if you would each just comment on what you would like to with regard to that subject matter, that'd be great. We'll go with Tim first, because I want to see you nod for once and stuff. Okay. Go ahead, Tim. Just on the brotherhood piece.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea of brotherhood and connection and having a tribe, I think, is probably the crux of the military in general. It's something you don't quite realize it's happening until it's already too late, so to speak. You train, eat, sleep, and live with the people to your left and the right for so long, And then for some folks, you deploy with them, and literally, there's always talk, and I've always been asked this question occasionally, like my personal thoughts on our conflicts and where we've been and what we're doing, and I tell everyone the same thing, is like at the end of the day, once you get over there, you realize that your main mission is to protect your buddy and bring your buddy home, and everyone else pretty much feels the same way. So the fact that he's talking about that, brother, and it resonates with me immensely, and coming back and realizing that it's true, you're really not going to quite ever experience that again. But at the same time, I found a lot of power and a lot of help and support from acquiring some sort of that tribe again, and that brotherhood and connection. I found that connecting with other veterans who'd gotten out and were missing that connection as well has been proven to be really powerful and effective.
So that was a key component for you when you came back, and that was a critical piece, that you realized that you needed to have that contact with other veterans.
Yeah, absolutely. It had its ups and downs as far as getting out of the military and transitioning into civilian life. I was kind of making a pretty good go of it, but I didn't really feel like I was succeeding at being a civilian per se, or really making my transition until I kind of found that tribe again.
Okay. Jonathan?
Yeah, that piece evoked a lot of emotion in me because I still struggle with it. I'm slowly gaining, acceptance in that piece that I don't have that. And for me, it went even deeper than brotherhood, because those individuals became my family. I mean, they replaced my father, my brother. Even though I'm very close to those people, these were the people that I would give my life for, and to this day I still would. And somehow not having that, just, I mean, it's an emptiness. It's hard to replace. Like I said, I still struggle with it.
And on the other side of that, as I approach retirement myself, I have to say, I will miss that aspect of my career. I always tell my wife, when I see two cars, police cars, I don't care where I am in the country, in a parking lot like this, it gets me, because there's a lot going on there, in a personal nature, professional nature, but for cops, that's how you keep it together, is the fellowship there. Okay, let's watch another piece by Sebastian again.
To slip right back into tribal life. And maybe what determines the rate of long-term PTSD isn't what happened out there, but the kind of society you come back to. And maybe if you come back to a close, cohesive, tribal society, you can get over trauma pretty quickly. And if you come back to an alienating modern society, you might remain traumatized your entire life. In other words, maybe the problem isn't them, the vets. Maybe the problem is us. Certainly, modern society is hard on the human psyche by every metric that we have. As wealth goes up in a society, the suicide rate goes up instead of down. If you live in modern society, you're up to 8 times more likely to suffer from depression in your lifetime than if you live in a poor agrarian society. Modern society has probably produced the highest rates of suicide and depression and anxiety and loneliness and child abuse ever in human history. I saw one study that compared women in Nigeria, one of the most chaotic and violent and corrupt and one of the poorest countries in Africa, to women in North America. And the highest rates of depression were urban women in North America. That was also the wealthiest group. So let's go back to the US military. 10% are in combat. Around 50% have filed for PTSD compensation. So about 40% of veterans really were not traumatized overseas, but have come home to discover that they are dangerously alienated and depressed. So what is happening with them? What's going on with those people? The phantom 40% that are troubled, but they don't understand why. Maybe it's this. Maybe they had an experience of sort of tribal closeness in their unit when they were overseas. They were eating together, sleeping together, doing tasks and missions together. They were trusting each other with their lives. And then they come home and they have to give all of that up, and they're coming back to a society, a modern society, which is hard on people who weren't even in the military. It's just hard on everybody. And we keep focusing on trauma, PTSD. But for a lot of these people, maybe it's not trauma. I mean, certainly soldiers are traumatized, and the ones who are have to be treated for that. But a lot of them, maybe what's bothering them is actually a kind of alienation. I mean, maybe we just have the wrong word for some of it.
All right, so again, this guy really, I mean, I've never been in combat, so put that out there, but I think there are enough similarities in law enforcement that I can empathize to some degree with somebody who's been in combat. But with regard to what he just said, follows a lot like the last piece we just looked at. But I do think he makes a critical point in that, you know, to have that kind of brotherhood and then to come back to a society where I just read another study that indicated that regardless of all the, you know, the social and the technology that we have available, more people are lonely than ever before. So that's the society in America that you come back to after having left that society. So I don't want you to repeat yourselves, and I guess this is a similar clip to what we just watched, but I'm all about touchy-feely. Anybody that's worked with me at Ann Arbor knows that, but that's why I'm in community engagement. But on a serious note, at the end of the day, it's what goes on, I believe, what goes on in our hearts and in our minds with other people that makes the difference, you know. And so when I saw Sebastian talking on this particular topic as it relates to the combat vet coming home, it made a great deal of sense to me. So you guys have any final words on this particular topic before we go to break here?
Yeah, I'd actually like to speak on that because I felt it in a couple different variations as far as coming back from combat, because I was medically evacuated from Afghanistan, so I was actually taken from my group of guys and put into a different environment when I got home, and therefore I was separated from my tribe, my family already on that basis, and I already started to feel alienated. And then my transition from the military wasn't as I'd liked, so then I even felt more alienated, and it almost kind of intensified that effect. And that's where I said I still struggle with that today, because even, you know, almost 5.5 years later, I'm just starting to feel like pieces are starting to fall together.
I'm glad to hear that, Johnson. Tim, anything?
I think it's really easy for that sort of thing to happen. From my personal experience getting out of the military and interacting with people who didn't serve, I think there's always a very well-intentioned desire to understand that perspective or that experience as people are trying to relate. It's not necessarily something that's achievable, but they try, and I think it's from a place of good. Okay. And I think that is overall a vast improvement that our society has managed to achieve in these recent conflicts.
Okay.
Is an overwhelming amount of support from the community. The understanding isn't necessarily there, and I don't know if it ever will be. But that being said, I think that the alienation isn't something that our society wants to have happen, or coming from a place of ill intent, but I think it's something that they want, that it is happening, and they want to do something to address it.
Gotcha.
And help out.
because it was my era, I often think of the men and women who served in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And boy, that breaks my heart to think that what they must have faced when they came back. But anyhow, okay, this isn't a happy-go-lucky show today, but I do appreciate the topic, and I hope the audience does as well. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Stations 1, 3, and 6 are responding to a 411 reported structure fire coming from the basement. Base 1 battalion still on the scene. I got heavy smoke showing. Give me another unit down here.
I'm a fire inspector with the Ann Arbor Fire Department. A fire can break out at any time, and having smoke detectors in your home will increase your chance of escape in the event there is a fire. Install and maintain smoke detectors on each level of your home, inside each bedroom and near sleeping areas. Test your detectors monthly and change their battery every 6 months. And if your current detector is 10 years old or more, replace it with a new one, because protecting you and your family is number one.
Battalion 2 to dispatch. Fire's under control. Everyone's out safe.
Catch up on FYI and other CTN programs at a2gov.org/watchctn.
What is CTN?
CTN? Isn't that the Commerce Telemarketing neighborhood or something?
CTN is Ann Arbor's community television network. We have provided free television production workshops and services to residents and nonprofit organizations since 1973. We also provide free programming about our community on cable channels 16, 17, 18, and 19. So, if you have an event coming up, are part of a nonprofit, or you simply just want to get creative, come on by. For more information, visit us at www.a2gov.org/CTN.
Let me ask you a question. What do you value? How about access to your child's education, their football game, their swim meet, their high school musical, their academic future? Does that matter? What about your access to your government, your police, fire, and public safety, parks and recreation activities, state and local officials, the folks you elect to make decisions for your community? Is that worth anything to you? What about your rights, freedom of speech, to communicate your message, to let your voice be heard? That's got to count for something, right? So let me ask you again, what do you value? How about public, educational, and government access television? It belongs to you. Let's keep it that way.
So, based on everything we've seen so far and your experiences overseas, what was it like for you to come back into the civilian world? What were some of the real struggles for you personally? And maybe what did you find to be successful? I know that Tim, you talked about, finding a different tribe, if you will, makes sense. But maybe we could just speak to that briefly. And we'll go to Tim again first, if you don't mind, buddy.
Sure. I found that one of the biggest challenges I had getting out of the military was not only losing that connection, but losing the mission, so to speak. One of the things that the military is really good at is giving you an objective, and usually giving you very clear marching orders for how to complete that objective, and leadership and training and so on and so forth. And then you depart the military and get back into the civilian world, and not only is the goal gone, but the rule book's gone, the instruction manual's gone.
Okay.
You're almost trapped in this paradox of crippling freedom. That'd be one way to put it.
Oh, interesting.
You go from a completely structured lifestyle to a completely unstructured lifestyle. I had this doubly so, kind of going out of the military and going into college, because it's just a very different. Your day looks very different. You know, you may have some classes here and there, but otherwise you kind of have to arrange your own schedule, figure out kind of what your day is going to look like to kind of meet the objectives of being an adult out of the military, but also kind of completing college courses. So just the idea of tackling that transition to going from almost exact opposites in terms of how your life ends up structured can be really challenging.
Okay. And I can think of other parallels. If we had time, we'd explore that, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't even thought of that. Anything to add to that, buddy?
Now, my experience is different, only that I didn't want to get out. I was gonna perish in the green suit. You know, I was a lifer, and like I touched on earlier, it's still an ongoing struggle, but it gets better every day.
Outstanding.
I do have my setbacks, but you know, I'm resilient, and my life before that in the military has taught me that I'm very resilient, and I've had my high moments, I've had my low moments, but you know, again, finding purpose again is what my goal is.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're a little bit further ahead on that journey than Jonathan was. And by the way, Tim is kind of in a mentoring relationship as well as a friendship through the VA. So I know it's been important for both of you to lean on each other. I appreciate you guys sharing, by the way. Okay, let's cut to a couple clips here in a row that we're going to see from an officer that was in the Vietnam War during my era, actually. So.
Welcome to this story of a warrior told in his own words. What he has to say is for all of us to hear, but especially those of us who have never been in combat. Carl Melanis, a small-town boy from Oregon, the son of a soldier, a graduate of Yale, landed in Vietnam in October 1968 and was placed in charge of 1st Platoon, Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 4th Marine Regiment. 1 year later, he came home with 2 Purple Hearts, the Navy Cross, the Bronze Star, 10 air medals, and memories that screamed at him. He finished his degree in philosophy at Oxford on a Rhodes Scholarship and spent the next 30 years in business, all the while wrestling with the demons that came home with him. Finally, in the late 90s, he asked the Veterans Administration for help and began treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder. 2 years ago, he published a novel. He had been working on it ever since he came home from Vietnam, Matterhorn, the story of a young second lieutenant leading a rifle platoon of 40 Marines on a remote jungle hill. Critics called it a powerhouse, tense, brutal, honest, unforgettable, moving, and intense. Carl Melanis has now written a second book, a nonfiction memoir and meditation on what it is like to go to war. Read it, and you will be closer than you can imagine to the mind and heart of the warrior in battle and after. America has been at war for over a decade now. 2 million Americans have served in Afghanistan and Iraq, and most of us here at home still don't get it. Carl Melanis and his book will help immeasurably. Carl Melanis, welcome.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
I haven't been sure about how to start this interview.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been to war.
Mm-hmm.
I've never looked a man in the eye who was trying to kill me and killed him before he could. I'm not even sure that I can ask a question that doesn't strike you as banal against your experience. I guess what I'm saying is that there's this divide between the warrior and the rest of us, and that divide can't really be crossed, can it?
No, but I think that what has to change is this inhibition that we all feel about asking. You know, you come back and there is this code of silence, you know, and both the, I call them civilian and the veteran, have it. And it gets in the way, and it's all done out of trying to be kind. But you know, it's like, well, I don't want to say something that upsets him, or I don't want to. And the fact of the matter is, if someone would genuinely ask, well, you know, can you talk about it? I think most guys would be delighted, you know. And sure, there are those who are going to say, I don't want to talk about it, you know, the classic. And there are going to be those. So then you wait a year or two and ask him again. And believe me, at some point, they're going to want to talk about it. I mean, it's a horrendous experience that people just need to talk about, to connect. And there is this divide. Our culture reinforces it. But I think that it's if someone's going to talk about it, you have the fear that they won't understand what you're saying and that they'll judge you badly. And so why open yourself up to that kind of a wound? Just you know, it's just better to just keep it quiet, because if they do misunderstand what you're really trying to say, how you really felt when you were 19 and pulled the trigger, and they don't get it, then you're in this morass, and then maybe you'll lose a friend, and maybe the girl won't like you. And I mean, there's all these things that, I mean, when you come back from war, most people, like Vietnam veterans, were 19 and 20 years old.
So my wife always gets a kick out of, I can't remember the simplest list she gives me, but I can recite a movie or an interview verbatim. So I say all that to say, again, Carl really resonated with me when I was looking through that. He comes across as very authentic, but he speaks to a couple things that I'd like us to kind of close the show with, if you will. He mentions in there that most guys would like to talk about it, and I know that you and I have talked, Jonathon, a little bit, and I'm not sure you're there yet, but he mentions the word genuine. That is to say, if someone genuinely asks you, you know, what was it like to be overseas? Can you tell me about some of your experiences? Is much different than somebody glibly, I would think, glibly saying to you, so did you ever kill anybody? You know, like, I mean, they'll still make that comment to me, you know, have you shot? I mean, I'm not sure where that comes from, it doesn't matter, but I think most officers are very insulted by that. But anyhow, so can you guys speak to that with regard to his comment on talking about it versus not talking about it? Maybe, you know, what finally had to change for you to be able to talk about it, or even to this day, maybe you're not willing to talk about it. I don't know, but we'll go with you, Jonathon, if you're ready, buddy.
No, I've never been afraid to talk about it. You know, not. And people that ask me, it's like, you know, have you ever killed anybody, or have you been in situations? It's not the combat that I like talking about. Mm-hmm. It's the experience of being there. I mean, you got to understand, I've been deployed overseas since 1998, since a young trooper. I was in the Middle East, I was in the Balkans, I was in Europe. I mean, I've been all over the countries, and then I was in Iraq and Afghanistan. The thing is I liked the experience. The combat for me, and I feel sometimes that people look at me weird when I say that, yeah, I did like being shot at, I did like being blown up, but I like the cultures as well. I like the experience. So like the brotherhood of being there with my friends and my family, and yeah, I'll gladly talk about it. Okay. And it's just, what hurts is missing it.
Yeah, yeah, I can appreciate that. I can appreciate the loss for that, for sure. Tim?
I think I definitely agree with what they said on the clip about comfort level. I think to some extent, and this isn't even just veterans, but everybody wants to tell their story, right? Everyone wants to be heard and feel like someone's trying to understand them. And I think veterans are the same way for the most part. I think it does definitely come from an area that not only do a lot of veterans not feel comfortable sharing their story for a variety of reasons, and I think stigma and fear of kind of not being accepted because of it, or having someone feel differently about them plays into it quite a bit.
Sure. Yeah,
I think at the same way, the civilian side of it is very true. I think a lot of people don't feel comfortable engaging a veteran in that discussion. I think a lot of times from either just kind of the general societal reaction, or veterans themselves might react strongly to it for one way or another. Civilians don't feel comfortable starting that dialogue or having a veteran share that story. So I think it's something that has to be worked on both ends, where there's, like they said, the divide really can't be bridged, but it's something where I think a lot more open discourse and understanding from both sides could go a long way.
Okay. And we're almost ready to close the show out, but, and I did talk to you guys prior to the show, but if you would each be willing to just kind of look in the camera there, Jonathan can go first and give your best takeaway with regard to the struggles of coming back, or where you find yourself now, and your best, if you will, supportive advice to somebody that might be watching.
Yeah, my best supportive advice to any veteran that is having a hard time or struggling on the verge of crisis is don't be afraid to reach out for help. It's there in many ways, and if you keep yourself isolated, it only gets worse and it stagnates. Many times it almost killed me, and thankfully I had those people around me that I finally reached out and opened my eyes and feel it in your heart. Don't intellectualize it. Feel it in your heart.
Oh, that's good. Thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate it. Tim?
Yeah, so I'd say anybody who's going through that transition, getting out of the military, and wants to, they feel like they are isolated or lost, or even if you don't feel that, even if it's going really smoothly, get connected is what I would say. Find that tribe again, whether it's, in my case, it's helping veterans in school. I really found that to be very powerful. Whatever it is for you, do that. And get connected to other veterans, other people in the community. Just don't come back and feel like you're doing this on your own, because you're not. There are people out there who've been in your shoes or going through what you're going through right now too. And it's just a matter of reaching out and finding them and not being afraid to do that.
Gentlemen, thank you for being here and being transparent and being willing to risk. It means a lot to me personally, and I know it does to the audience as well. We're going to put the Veterans Crisis Hotline up on the screen. Please take advantage of that. But as Jonathan indicated, it is a phone tree, so if it's an immediate and imminent situation where you need help now, please don't hesitate to use 911. Because that's what we are here for. That's what the other emergency services are here for. We're here for you. With that, we close out a show today. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service. Thank you again for being here. Blessings.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks.
Take care.